First things first. Sorry if I get too incoherent at any point here. I'm trying to bang my account of things out as fast as possible, and I'm under a lot of pressure. My headache's getting worse, but typing's making it feel better, weirdly. Feels right. So that's what I'm going to do. For as long as I'm capable, and when I'm done, I'm going to hit send, and if my internet comes back and this gets posted, then at the very least, maybe someone out there will read this and learn from my mistakes. God, my head hurts. Okay, focus. Here we go. I took that video, the one of the UFO, maybe 3 weeks ago or so. I had work off and I was having a pretty great day, drinking garbage beer and finishing up at Goosehead. Goosehead's Lake, or reservoir, I guess. You don't get many lakes in Arizona. I was packing up at dusk, and it was a cloudless day, great weather, and I had the dock all to myself. I took a second to drink it in before I stepped into my car to head home, and that was when I noticed the UFO. And when I say UFO, I really mean that literally like unidentified flying object, because that's literally all I can figure out about it. It was an object, probably, and it was flying, and I sure as hell couldn't identify it. But it wasn't like one of those classic saucers with the blinky lights and the tractor beam and the spooky techno sound effects. It was more like a single glowing shard, sitting totally still a few hundred feet above the far end of the lake. Well, okay, still. In that it wasn't moving up and down or side to side. The thing itself, though, it was jittering, moving without moving, like... Maybe I'd be able to whip up a good analogy if I didn't currently feel like I had an ice pick shoved through my eye. Migraines make for a real effective writer's block. The best way that I can think to describe it is that the UFO, it would be a triangle shape one moment and a sphere the next, and then a horseshoe shape and then a spiral. But it was also all of those at once. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense. I'd post the video I took, but, well, I don't have that anymore, obviously. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I did take a video. My phone was low on storage, so I could only manage like 30 seconds of footage, but I got it. Didn't really do the thing justice, though. Like, have you ever tried to take a photo of the moon? You know, like, one night the moon's just really big and it looks awesome in person, and you think, man, that'd make a cool wallpaper. So you snap a pic with your phone, but no matter what angle you get or what settings you use, the moon in your photo just looks like a little speck. It was like that. Cool video of a glowing speck in the sky. The UFO disappeared, just sort of blinked away after I finished filming it. And I was left with a pretty useless 20-second clip and a funny story to tell. It didn't even occur to me to send the video to the news or anything. I wasn't even really convinced I'd seen anything that extraordinary. Like if you'd told me that what I'd seen had been some sort of optical illusion, some weird interaction between the sun and the clouds, or a weather balloon, or, I don't know, like swamp gas, I would have believed you. I promise I would have. I posted the video on Instagram, and that was probably my big mistake. Posting it publicly, but I don't know. I felt like I'd seen something kind of special, and living in such a small town, I didn't feel comfortable bringing video to the local news or anything. I thought this would just be a cool little video for my friends and family. Nothing more, swear to God. So I posted it and drove home and went to bed. I woke up to find that the video had exactly 0 likes and just as many comments. That was surprising. I mean, I'm not an influencer or anything, but I've never had a post get so little attention. More than that though, the rejection stung. So I just sort of quietly deleted the post and went on with my life. Didn't think anything of it. A week later, I'm watching TV at home and my brain sort of goes fuzzy. It was like deja vu, kind of. Or the feeling you get in a dream when you know what's going to happen before it does. Dream logic. The feeling settled onto me, and in a few seconds I was up off the couch and heading to the door, as if the doorbell had just rung. It hadn't, my house was silent, but in the moment, I don't think that little detail even crossed my mind. I opened the door to find... Sorry. Headache just flared real bad, had to take a sec. I opened the door to find... I just realized I never got the guy's name. I don't know if he has one. For the sake of the story, I guess I'll call him Tall, because that's the very first word that came to mind. The figure standing stooped on my porch was easily the tallest man I'd ever seen, probably close to 6'10", maybe more. I couldn't get much of a sense for what his body looked like. He was all bundled up in what had to be 3 or 4 layers of coats and sweaters. But even though I could tell that his proportions were off, his legs didn't go nearly high enough. His shoulders were too narrow. His eyes... Headache again. Tal didn't have any hair. That was the second thing that struck me about him. No eyebrows, no lashes. His lips weren't lip-shaped. Like, instead of the usual tapering, half-moon curve most people's lips have, his was more like a perfectly uniform border of red skin circling a tiny little slit of a mouth, the only color of his otherwise white face. And he smelled like antifreeze. So, okay, I noticed all of these things about him. I know I did. I remember noticing them. And I also remember a tiny, logical, terrified part of me sounding alarm bells. But all of the weird details about his body fit the dream logic that I was currently wrapped up in, and that suffocating feeling of deja vu drowned out the part of me that knew better. So when he asked to come inside, his voice high and reedy and all in one breath, I stepped politely back and let him in without any hesitation. He didn't take off any of his coats or his shoes. He paced directly into my kitchen and started rummaging around my cabinets until he found a cup. He started filling the cup in my sink and turned to me, his slit mouth wrangled into a sort of smile. He asked me if I knew who he was. I answered honestly and said no. He asked me if I knew why he was there. I took a bleary, hazy sort of guess and said that maybe it had to do with the video I took. He nodded. I asked if he was from the government, and he laughed without opening his mouth. He asked me if I was scared. For some reason, I couldn't figure out what that question even meant, and I blinked, struggling. He nodded at that, looked satisfied, and then offered me the glass of water in his hand and told me to drink. The water was a murky gray. I don't remember seeing him add anything to it, but it clearly wasn't water anymore. When I lifted the drink to my lips to take a sip, I got a whiff of that antifreeze smell, so strong and acrid that it made my eyes water. In fact, the smell was so bad that it sort of jostled me out of my weird, almost trance, and I spasmed, dropping the glass. He didn't flinch when the cup shattered on the floor. He just squinted at me and hummed, an unexpectedly deep noise that could have meant anything. Just as suddenly as it left, the deja vu feeling was back, and I stopped shaking. The voice in my head, the one telling me to scream or fight or run, went away, and I stared blankly at the mess on my floor. He asked me for my phone. I reached into my pocket and handed it to him. He asked me if I'd sent the video I took to the news. I told him that I was planning on it, but hadn't yet. He asked me if I'd told anyone in person. A little spike of worry managed to pierce the fog of my brain, and I stammered, trying to keep my answer in. After what must have been 10 seconds of choking and stuttering, I said that I'd told some of my family when I'd met them for dinner that weekend. He asked who specifically and what their addresses were. Again, the fog lifted as adrenaline and fear shot through my heart. I wrestled with that answer for maybe 5 minutes, but I won out in the end. I clamped my hands over my mouth, stuffed my fingers onto my tongue, and kept quiet. I don't remember him leaving. I woke up the next morning on my couch, and I quickly attributed the memory to being a weird dream. Even as I swept the broken glass from my kitchen floor and searched my house for my suddenly missing phone, I never once questioned that I'd dreamt the whole thing. I don't think I could have thought otherwise if I tried. 2 days later, I woke up to find Tal crouched next to my bed. I screamed, obviously, at the sight of his stretched-out figure folded into a stooped squat at my bedside, his horrible, bloodless face looming down over mine, a flask of that gray liquid in his outstretched hands, nearly to my lips. I swatted the flask out of his hand before that deja vu swept back in again, smothering my fear like a blanket. It only took a few seconds before I was laying on my back, blinking patiently up at him. He asked me again who I told and where they lived. I said my father lives on Woodland. Oh God, the migraines are making this hard. I'm going to have to stop soon. I stuffed my pillow into my mouth to keep from answering, and all of a sudden it was dawn, and I had memories of another weird dream to keep me occupied while I cleaned up the dark gray stain on my carpet. I thought the whole ordeal was over by today. Nearly 2 weeks had passed, and I'd really truly forgotten all about it. But then I took a step out for my lunch break at work this morning, And just as I was rounding the corner toward the parking lot, that deja vu feeling hit me like a truck, almost bowling me over. It was so strong. I froze, reeling, and a reedy voice from just behind me told me to pinch my nose closed. Unable to even begin to question the order, let alone stop myself, I did. Then it told me to turn around. I did. Then another flask was being pushed into my mouth, forcefully enough to crack against my teeth, and a plastic hard hand that was grabbing at my hair, yanking my head back. All it took was one surprised, strangled gulp, and my mouth and throat were burning as that antifreeze smell became an antifreeze taste. Tall clapped one of his cold hands over my mouth until I swallowed the whole drink, and then he was gone. I didn't fall asleep this time, though. No, this time I got in my car and drove straight home. Then once the deja vu wore off and the first twinges of a headache started, I began to panic. I picked up my new phone, thinking that I should probably call an ambulance, probably get my stomach pumped before anything, but all I got was a busy signal. I tried over and over again. I tried to call the police. My dad who lives on Woodland. My mom. I tried to text someone. None of those went through. I tried to physically leave my house to run in the direction of town, but there are these men parked outside. These normal-looking men in suits. And each time they just sort of grab me and the deja vu comes back and I'm suddenly back inside. Finally, I figured out that although my internet's out, I have an old blog with a plugin installed that will auto-update when I make a post on a folder in my Google Docs. And I can do that in offline mode. I've made it this far, and although my vision's blotting with pain and my head's completely on fire, I haven't been knocked out yet. So at the moment, I think my best course of action is to post this publicly to tell the nice man where my family lives. Hopefully get the word out about what's going on, about where I am, to maybe get some help. Please, anyone who hears this, my name is Todd Jacobs. You could find my address. My father lives on Woodland Ave. My sister lives on Dr. Street. My mother lives on Canyon Ave. Please don't hurt them. I love them. They're the only ones I told, I swear. And phone number is in the About section of the blog. Please, if anyone can come find me and take me to the hospital, I really think I need to go. And if, on the way, you see a light in the sky, for the love of God, don't even look at it. I feel like my head's going to explode. Well, you really screwed up this time, didn't you? You found a gnarly deal on a beautiful home that almost seemed too good to be true, and you jumped at it. And now that you're all moved in, you've started to notice some anomalies. You know the type, the spooky dooky anomalies of the supernatural persuasion. Bumps in the night, doors opening and closing by themselves, auditory hallucinations of voices and whispers. It's more common than you may think, but not everyone realizes the danger. These signs could be proof that some forsaken lost souls inhabit your property. Maybe the previous grandmother self-immolated in the attic. Maybe dear old dad went suddenly insane and repainted the house with the blood of his children. Or mom tried seducing demons in the basement. If this sounds even vaguely familiar to you, and you were looking to the good old internet for help, then you've come to the right place. You see, I have this friend. Well, I had this friend named Nathan. A couple months back, Nathan found a house for sale in southern Georgia. It was nestled along a remote stretch of woods just outside of Waycross. It was a historical area, an old colonial-style home just under 5,000 square feet, 6-bed, 6-bath, with white picket fences and a dozen acres. The quintessential American dream house by all accounts. The price was unbelievably low, but after Nathan contacted the real estate agent, he found that the price that he had seen listed was indeed the price that was being asked. For most people, I imagine this would have raised some pretty big flags, but Nathan was an idiot. The confident type of idiot that believed machismo is substantial for conquering all of life's obstacles. I know it's not kind to speak ill of the dead like that, spoiler alert, but I'm just trying to give an accurate portrayal of the kind of person Nathan was. You know, the alpha male who hits on your girlfriend, lives at the gym, and probably spanks his meat to his own selfies. For people like Nathan, friend is really just another word for ego reinforcer. He was cocky and often let pride get the better of him. His wife Janelle was actually my ex-girlfriend from a while back. A bit of a skank, but practically a supermodel. They had 2 kids, Natalie and Mason, who were both spoiled brats. Again, I'm just trying to give an honest perspective of them in hopes that we may all learn something from what happened. You see, what happened to Nathan, which I'll get into later, was something which I believed could have been easily avoided if only he had followed a few simple instructions. After the funeral, I got to pondering on the matter and realized that what we all really need is a set of rules to follow if you believe your house is haunted. Let's begin. Rule number 1. When looking to purchase or rent a house, always ask for the history. Odds are, if a house is being offered at way below market value, then there is a very good reason for it being that way. Nathan didn't do this, and thought that the under-market price was simply the universe handing him something he didn't really earn, as it often seemed to do. Nathan jumped at the offer, and within a few weeks he and his family were approved to begin moving in. I volunteered to help them move in, and I'll be honest, the house was absolutely gorgeous. Things were great for them at first, but Nathan soon started noticing some odd occurrences. It started with this knocking sound that seemed to reverberate all over the home and at odd hours. He said he could never seem to pinpoint where it was coming from, and it never seemed to originate from the same place twice. Eventually, he just chalked it up to the house settling. That was just the beginning. Rule number 2. Trust your gut. Your home is the last place you should feel uncomfortable. If you get that inkling of discomfort in the back of your mind that never seems to fully dissipate, pay attention to it. It's probably your subconscious trying to warn you. Nathan tried ignoring these sounds, told his wife that it was just normal or the wind, and comforted his children when they felt scared. He had 2 dogs, Rusty and Sailor, both of them black labs, and both seemed to become very anxious after moving in. Nathan did his best to get medication to help the dogs relax, but it didn't seem to help much. That brings us to rule number 3. Along with your gut, you should also trust your pets. Animals have instincts far greater than humans. It's been said that man is the only creature who will sense danger and still wander into it. Animals have a sense for the supernatural, dogs and cats in particular. If you find them growling at what appears to be nothing, or constantly staring into specific areas of the house, then pay attention to that. Odds are they can see something you can't. Nathan told me that Rusty, the older of the 2 dogs, would pace the hall each night for hours. He said it was like he was standing guard or something. On more than one occasion, Rusty suddenly blurted into a ferocious bout of barking and snarling. Nathan would come out into the hall, but never found anything. He grew concerned for Rusty and took him to the vet, but the vet confirmed he was in good health. Meanwhile, Sailor, the younger dog, slept at the side of Mason's bed each and every night. The poor boy soon developed crippling nightmares that would torment him relentlessly, and Sailor seemed to sense it. Each time Mason would wake up screaming, Sailor would be there to try and comfort him. And that segues perfectly into our next rule. Rule number 4. Beware the nightmares. Young children are similar to animals in the way that they seem more perceptive to things that adults are not. This one can be difficult because there are many root causes of nightmares with things like anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. The telltale sign is whether your child suddenly develops them soon after entering the home. Poor Mason had absolutely horrific dreams, and night after night he would be tormented by them. He often spoke of the blurry man that came to him while he slept and whispered terrible things. He even said that sometimes he would see the blurry man while he was awake, but never more than a quick glimpse and always in the shadows or outside in the woods. Nathan and his wife worried that perhaps Mason was schizophrenic, but multiple doctors confirmed this was not the case. They tried giving Mason sleeping pills, various supplements, and burning incense to help him sleep more peacefully. It worked for a while, until Natalie started having them too. Rule number 5. Try to determine what kind of spirit you're dealing with. If you see flashes of a small child running through the halls at night, or orbs spiraling in the air, then odds are your ethereal neighbor is rather benign. Some people even discover they rather enjoy life with a spectral roommate, and find their antics to be rather interesting. Most believe that spirits who pass away before completing what their soul desired will become stuck in a sort of purgatory. Many are scared, confused, and angry, but some, primarily young children, seem to be almost jubilant at times. Most of these are unnerving but altogether harmless. But then there's the other spirits. Rule number 6. If you or any member of your family develop inexplicable bruises, cuts, or lesions, then do not take them lightly. This should be a massive red flag, and it is a very bad sign. If you feel as though you are being attacked as you sleep, and wake up with unexplained scratches or wounds, then just get the hell out of the house. Honestly. A malevolent spirit capable of inflicting physical wounds is not something to be trifled with. Odds are it's a demon, and honestly, that is the best case scenario. There are other non-Abrahamic related entities that could be responsible as well. They are very rare, but if encountered, well, I'm afraid even my handy set of rules won't be enough to stop them. Natalie and Mason suffered multiple scratch marks, wounds, and even a few bruises that almost looked like bite marks. Nathan's wife, Janelle, was also subjected to these attacks. The children's teachers at school began to notice and became quite worried for their safety. Obviously, their first thought was not paranormal, but rather that the children were being abused at home. Only when social services threatened to remove the children from his custody did Nathan finally agree to move them out of the house. Janelle and the kids moved in with her mother a couple hours away, and Nathan was left all alone with the dogs. Rule number 7. Let people know what is going on. Yes, I know the thought of admitting to a close friend that you believe your house is haunted may be a daunting one, but it's usually better than the alternatives. The modern world rarely takes these claims seriously. We put ghosts in movies and video games, but when someone actually claims to see one, we aren't so quick to believe them. Technology and science have led us to believe we are safe. That is our folly, but it's also a topic for a different day. This is yet another rule that Nathan did not abide. The worse that things got for him and his family, the more secluded he became. On numerous occasions, he phoned the police saying that he believed someone had broken in, but they never found evidence of it. Eventually, they put him on a blacklist and warned that any further contact would result in legal trouble. Rather than tell his parents or brother or any of his friends what was going on, he retreated into himself. He became fidgety and paranoid, at times refusing to return phone calls and texts from his loved ones. He just broke contact and things only got worse. Rule number 8 and 9 sort of belong in the same category, although one is a little more extreme than the other. Rule number 8. If you suspect something is up, it doesn't hurt to perform a cleansing. Like I said earlier, the modern world has little time to entertain the notion of ghosts and supernatural, but that shouldn't ward you off. If you're unsure about whether your home is being haunted or not, then a routine cleansing can do wonders for you. I'm willing to bet there are mediums and priests in your town that can get the job done. Even if you can't find anyone local, you can always go online and find instructions for yourself. It's not as effective that way, but it's better than nothing. Rule number 9. If you're really feeling as though you are in danger, get someone to perform an exorcism. It's the step that no one wants to take, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Priests and spiritual leaders are your go-to for these kinds of things. Even if you yourself are not religious, these people honestly do know how to help. There's some evidence that Nathan was attempting to do this, but it's unknown why exactly it didn't work out. Maybe he second-guessed himself and thought he could handle it, or maybe his ego took control once again. Nathan had been collecting evidence for a while and had amassed quite a stash of clues. He had audio recordings which relayed banging on the walls and footsteps in the attics. He took multiple videos, but none of them really showed anything except for the last one. But by that point, it was too late. In his journal, he also wrote that he experienced items in the house levitating on several occasions. But sadly, he had no recorded proof of this. Rule number 10. The big one. Whatever you do, do not try to antagonize the spirit. This should really go without saying, but angrily challenging the spirit or daring it to manifest is a really bad idea. But as you may have guessed, Nathan, in his unlimited stream of testosterone, decided to do just that. He got really drunk one night and began ruminating on all of that had been happening. Nathan was always a skeptic, but even he couldn't ignore the psychological impact on his family, whether it was imagined or not. He realized his relationship with his children and wife were being heavily strained, and his new house had become a place of hostility. This made Nathan very angry. So Nathan stood up and shouted at his empty house for the spirit to come forth and face him. He was met only with silence, and so he shouted again. Never once did the spirit answer his call. After a few more verbose challenges, he broke into a bout of laughter, probably believing himself to look ridiculous. Apparently not everyone who was watching felt the same though. Nathan managed to stumble into bed not long after, and was out cold within a couple minutes. Nathan had kept a security camera in his room in hopes of capturing proof. And that night, he found something. At around 2:13 a.m., Nathan is seen beginning to stir in his sleep in the security video. He grunts and speaks briefly, but the words were unintelligible. Suddenly, his eyes sprung wide open in the bed, and he began glancing around the room. Nathan appeared to be struggling, but his body didn't move. It is believed he was suffering an episode of sleep paralysis, which left him temporarily paralyzed. His eyes continued to dart rapidly around the room. Then something happened that no one who saw the video could explain. The bedroom door slowly rolled open, but the darkness of the hallway was all-consuming. Nathan's chest began frantically pumping up and down, and his eyes stretched wide open. Something was then seen moving in the hall. It could have been chalked up to a trick of the light at first, but then a hand was seen reaching through. It was gnarled and spindly, like the wretched malformed appendage from some abyssal denizen. The figure slowly sauntered through the doorway, its tall, dark silhouette nearly grazing the top of the doorframe. It had no definite features, appearing only as a hooded, humanoid individual. No eyes or face, just a shadow, corporealized from Nathan's deepest nightmares. Poor Nathan was heard mumbling and whimpering frantically, but in his paralyzed state he was unable to fight back or flee. He could do nothing but watch in absolute horror as the thing approached him. It stopped at the foot of his bed and just stared at him for about a minute. Nathan continued to hyperventilate and didn't appear to blink once during the entire ordeal. The thing then finally moved closer. It then leaned down only a couple inches away from his face and appeared to whisper something. It was too quiet for the mic on the camera to pick up, but needless to say, it did not make Nathan feel any better about the situation. Suddenly, the thing lashed out with its twisted hands, constricting like pythons around Nathan's throat. In his paralyzed state, he couldn't even struggle against his shrouded attacker. Within a minute, Nathan's chest stopped moving, and his eyes fell still. The entity retracted its hands and just stared at him for about a minute. Then, as if taunting those who would see the footage, it looked directly into the camera. It whispered something again, but again it was too quiet to discern what it was. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it waltzed out of the room and vanished back into the darkness. Nathan was found by his wife Janelle a few days later, and she called the police. After an autopsy, Nathan was determined to have died via strangulation, much as what was shown in the video. Cops scoured the premises and found footprints from the intruder. However, the footprints were soon matched to a pair of Nathan's own boots. The police, of course, were not so quick to believe that Nathan was simply killed by supernatural forces. They conducted interviews with neighbors, friends, and family members. but none of them seemed capable or motivated enough to have done it. There were no signs of breaking and entering, and nothing had been stolen from the home. They came to me and conducted an interview as well, but of course that was a futile effort. I mean, sure, the fact that Janelle was my ex-girlfriend was reason to suspect me, but I quickly dissuaded their accusations. Nathan was my friend, despite him not really being a good friend. What kind of friend bones your girlfriend behind your back anyways? I'm not bitter about it though. At least, not as far as the police are concerned. My alibis were solid, and that's good enough for them. This brings us to my final rule. Rule number 11. Make sure you exhaust all other options before coming to the conclusion that your house is in fact haunted. If only Nathan had taken a little more time to investigate his home and himself more thoroughly, then maybe he'd still be alive today. Maybe he would have found the mini wireless speakers hidden in his attic to play the sounds of knocking. Maybe he would have found the patches in his air ducts that leaked mild doses of hallucinogenic drugs into his home. Maybe he would have detected the dog whistle alarm that caused his dogs to react so strangely. If he even bothered to check himself, he may have found trace amounts of suxamethonium, a paralyzing toxin that once ingested will leave the person immobile, yet conscious to all pain. It would have been difficult to find, as even coroners do not normally test for the substance unless specifically requested. No matter how you really slice it, this entire ordeal really comes back to Nathan himself. If only he had been a better person and not constantly demeaned his peers at every turn. If only he hadn't been so stubborn and proud. If only he hadn't gone behind my back and boned my ex-girlfriend, thus ruining our future and sending me into the spiraling depths of crippling depression, then maybe I would have helped him. So you may be wondering, is this my confession? No, of course not. This is only my list of suggestions and rules for how things may have turned out differently for Nathan and his family. These are all hypothetical explanations and are in no way to be considered incriminating evidence to be used in court against me or anyone else for that matter. Besides, if this really was a confession, then that would make anyone who listens to it an accessory to murder. We certainly wouldn't want that. I hope you can understand that, and I do hope that we can trust each other in this regard. After all, I have really good software for tracing IPs, and Reddit makes it incredibly easy to access them. We wouldn't want your house to suddenly become haunted, now would we? Thank you for making it this far. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe if you like my content. If you'd like to follow me and want to be involved in what I'm doing / talk to me, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. If you'd like an offline experience, check out the podcast, The Midnight Podcast. And if you're at all inclined, I've got some merch out there to be purchased if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.